Today's lecture is about some unfortunate changes we've observed in American and Western society. The United States not only has implications for the global economy, but also global culture, as Hollywood manufactures culture and then pushes it around the world. And now we can add social media to that cadre of folks who define what it is to be cool, what it is to be the in group, what it is to be kind, considerate, what it is to be a good person. Yes. Today, we're going to today we're going to deep dive into a conversation that I've had many times before with you all. I've called it matriarchy, but today we'll speak of it as the feminization of culture. This is something that has certainly overtaken Europe and is going on throughout the West and certainly in the United States as well. As a basis for this conversation, I want to engage the work of one economist known as Tyler Cohen. There is a summary of his work given by a woman named Helen Andrews, which is a bit of irony. She represents the multitude of women who purport to be conservative while living out the life of a feminist. And this underscores something I've said many times, which is that women are lovely, have many values that they offer to a man and to family, but the truth is not in them. Regardless, this woman is intelligent and talented, and for that reason, we will take a look at her work. Really not her work. She's presenting the work of Tyler Cohen, and she's doing a good job at it. So let's go ahead and give a listen, and unfortunately, the outcomes that you and I and our children will experience.
Once wrote a blog post describing all of the revolutions he's seen in the course of his lifetime to today's advent of AI.
So she starts off by talking about how Tyler has noted that there have been a number of revolutions that have affected human affairs, and they've changed in a radical way the way people around the world get on. Now, with regards to this term revolution, we kind of have been conditioned to think of it as something that's either really good or really bad. And in this case, I think the categorization of really bad is quite accurate, and it challenges some of the silly assumptions that we hear from gender feminists, things that suggest that, well, if women ruled the world, then there'd be no wars. Fascinating. You can scarcely get 5 women together without them starting to undermine one another, manipulate, and be passive aggressive. The same is not true. You get 5 men together, you got something called a basketball team. You get 10 men together, we can run full court. You get 10 women together, you have drama, bickering, disharmony, deceit, gossip. And this is no insult of women. It's merely an observation of nature. And both genders have their drawbacks. We find that men may be overly aggressive, may not be the best with their communication skills, but they are good with conflict resolution, and so on and so forth. So let's get into it. So long story short, we're starting this conversation with a note that the feminization of culture represents a revolution, a radical change in how human beings behave and how the society proceeds. And I agree.
And there were only 7 revolutions on this list because this was only the greatest and most earth-shaking ones. The internet is not a phrase that a lot of Americans hold, the great feminization. That is not a phrase that a lot of Americans know, but future historians may well rank. The great feminization is very easy to define. It refers to the increasing representation of women in all of the institutions of our society.
I can give a better definition. It is not, and it's better at this point in the lecture because you don't understand certain elements. It is not that women are present in the workforce. It is not that women are present at high numbers or high percentage, high proportion in universities. It is that when they arrive, they reorganize affairs to favor them. They reorganize affairs to increase female recruitment and also ensure that the culture of the workplace, the culture of the university, is one that is chiefly feminine and unfortunately very antagonistic to what preceded the domination of female culture. and certainly unwelcoming to male culture and male ways of thinking and being. And in fact, it has been so aggressive, the female dominion we've seen in these spheres, that they've even created terms like toxic masculinity. Imagine the idea of defining the mere existence of the man as toxic. Masculinity is inherent to the man, to the male. And to define that as toxic is an extraordinary slap in the face to half of the human population, and as well those women who are decent enough to know that men are a necessary part of life, and the good life, in fact. So we find that the matriarchy is not as peaceful as has been suggested, and it certainly is not as beneficial as one would think. And we're experiencing the suffering in our society. We see that America is a matriarchal society, and this is as it declines. And you might say, Marquette, how is it a matriarchy when we have the highest office in the land is occupied by one man? I would challenge you to be a bit more thoughtful and consider that when you have females over enrolled in university, overrepresented in certain positions in management and in law and in politics, ever growing, and also changing the culture and policy and legislation, then you have effectively a matriarchy. It is the idea that you have one person out front, figurehead, because the culture itself is not what he has decided. And in fact, the culture will eventually consume him and do away with him. We undoubtedly have a matriarchy, and we have to fight it not for the good of man, but for the good of humankind, because there's certain inherent qualities that are common to the female that are very detrimental to the society when they are allowed to reign. You find that increasingly the society is not relying on facts, truth, and justice, which is where you get situations like hashtag Me Too, which is not about protecting women from aggressors and perverts, but rather it overly empowers any female, whether she be dishonest or honest, whether she be a true victim or just one seeking money and clout, gold digger. It empowers them to destroy a man's name, reputation, career, future earnings, all from her mouth. And when they lie and they're found out to be liars, like, for example, the woman who had Emmett Till killed, and this has been going on for centuries, there is no consequence to it. That is what should bother us. Shout out to Ernest, the very first person to come in and use a star on Facebook. I'm still learning Facebook. This is my first time doing a proper live stream here. So I say that to say, very dangerous are these folks when put into positions of power, which is to say, when they are in an unnatural position.
But as simple as it is to define, it's very difficult for those of us on the other side of that revolution to fully grasp its significance. The first thing that most people fail to understand about it is how unprecedented it is in human history. There have been many societies that have been.
So I think this is not true. People who are reasonably intelligent and decently studied in history, they know that their matriarchy has not been the way of the world in any society. So I think this is an exaggeration, and this is not unusual. You hear academics speak. They like to be a bit hyperbolic about their importance or the importance of their discovery or whatever they're talking about. But I think we all know that the concept of women ruling or being in certain positions is a fairly new thing, and also a seriously ridiculous concept most of the time. For example, when you have female police officers, just yesterday I was in the Apple store, and the security guard in there was a 5'2" woman. And I was just thinking, is this a joke? 5'2" woman? You got to be kidding me. Who can she protect? She can't even protect herself. Just imagine the security ends up getting beaten up and assaulted in all ways that she can be assaulted. Who's going to help her? She's going to have one of the customers help her. It's just a ludicrous concept. When you allow women to rule, the society becomes a tragic comedy, because women are not focused on the truth or even what is right for often they don't know what is right. Their psychology and their wiring does not allow them to see what is right, that is the truth, because their priorities, due to their biology, their priorities are for everyone to feel included, for everyone to feel valued and loved, and we're all equal and we're all worthwhile. And they exercise these lies, except when it comes to mating. Generally, when it comes to mating, they want the man to be taller than them. They want the man to make more money. And so that is why I tell you that the woman, the truth is not in her, and being principled and moral and just is not it's not one of their talents. And for that reason, we should allow, or rather, seek to funnel them into roles where they can use their true talents, as opposed to masquerading as a man and causing us all to suffer. If you have a female in the Apple store masquerading as a police officer or a security, then we're all at risk. The women there are at risk, the men are at risk, and the comedy, even the security officer, the police who's a woman, is also at risk. And you've all seen the videos on social media where there's a woman attempting to do a man's job and she fails and looks foolish, and then some man has to come along and help her. And in the comments, you see women carrying on the feminization of culture instead of telling the truth, which is, wow, we should not do this. We should not misplace the wrong person into that role. It's like putting a person who is intellectually delayed. I think that's a euphemism they use now, and we can't use the truth anymore because women are running the society, and women hate the truth. They hate the brutal facts. They prefer comforting lies. So you have to say intellectually delayed instead of using the R word, which is the one that describes what I'm actually trying to forward. But instead of having someone who's highly gifted being a neurosurgeon, we'll have someone who's mentally or intellectually delayed as a neurosurgeon, so everyone can be included. This is what the society will devolve to, and the society has certainly been in decline. Human society, we see this in declining IQ. Yes, it's a real thing. We also see this in the levels of testosterone among males declining rapidly in the last century. And even if you look out at how shabby people are, folks used to wear suits every day. They used to dress up when they go outdoors. And now we find that everyone's wearing sweats, and people don't seem to have any self-regard or self-respect. Much of the society is on drugs. In fact, many women, particularly white women, in fact, the statistic is that 1 in 4 white women are on, head pills, if you will, to put it colloquially. Shout out to Mr. Naeem, supporting the work, came in with a star. He writes, "Peace of the Saints, the platform expansion continues. Glad to see Facebook unbanned you." You know what? I may be shadow banned because I have 170,000 followers on Facebook, yet this stream is not being pushed out, as you guys observe. And also encourage everyone to use the information below, because knowing that masculine men, rational men, good people are under the attack, we must treat all of these platforms as a hotel rather than a home. And so we perhaps don't want to get too comfortable using all of their built-in monetization tools, because at some point they may randomly say, hey, no more, too much truth. You got to go. So, that's the era that we live in. And also, as we go through this talk, you'll see that freedom of speech is actually something that women are very much so against, generally speaking, on average. And that's because freedom of speech allows for the truth, even the ugly truth. And number two, freedom of speech, whether it's true or not, may hurt people's feelings. And women will prioritize feelings over what is right, over what is just, over what is functional and what has utility. And it is because of the fact that they are ruled by emotions and sometimes whims and sometimes more base human driving forces. Not to say that men are much better, but in different ways. We might be ruled by drive for sex and things like this. But the fact is, these instincts in the woman have been very destructive, particularly to things like truth and freedom of speech. Not saying that they're the same thing, they're different things. Carrying on.
Businesses and held positions of authority that commanded the respect of men. But there has never been a society in which women hold as much political power as they do today. Think of all of the parliaments.
I want you all to
that have
take that.
ever-
I want you to take that very seriously. There has never been a society where women have held as much power as they do today. Mind you, this is not progress. Just because something is occurring now as opposed to the past, that doesn't mean the world is doing this. That doesn't mean it's progress. In fact, I might suggest that it is yet another symptom of an ailing empire, yet another symptom of a dying culture. We're not in the roaring 20s. We're not in the age where America was just bleeding edge in terms of invention and having a dynamic economy. America was on the gold standard and had a strong economy, and the dollar was strong then. No, we're at the time where America is in extraordinary levels of debt, where average people cannot buy homes, where everyone's been fooled into the idea of they must have a two income household. We're in the era where Americans are fake rich and everyone's laden with pharmaceuticals, and the kids are born getting injected with vaccines that we don't need. The government has no trust from the people, and we're on the verge of the total collapse of our democracy. And now we see women are in power. So you have to remember that women being in power today, this had to have been prepared for decades ago. So it's been in process and it has arrived. And we see, along with the arrival of the matriarchy, has been very high levels of destruction to our society. And when I say our society, I'm talking about human society, unfortunately. I wish it was just limited to, say, the blacks, or limited to America, or limited to the West. But this ails an entire planet of humankind. And unless we do something and guide the society intelligently and morally, we will all suffer. I promise you, the suffering will grow.
Existed. Every legislature in every country in every century. None of them has been, as ours is, 1/3 female. The idea
It's
of
insane.
a female chief of police would have seemed very strange even to many.
It seems extraordinarily strange because a woman really wouldn't feel comfortable walking down a dark alley in Chicago, Baltimore, Los Angeles, New York, but she's in charge of protecting the people and she can't even protect herself. I mean, it's ludicrous, honestly. It's ludicrous, and it's funny, but more so the kind of laughter that causes you to cry after when you're in private. It's ridiculous.
The early feminists. And yet today, the police department is led by a woman in the largest city in America and in the city in which we are now standing. Law schools today are majority female. Law firm associates are majority female.
You have all of this structure that protects the female and allows for her bad behavior. You see, in a society that was more simple, government much smaller, women would certainly stay in their place. There would be a natural order. Even small men would stay in their place, and a balance would arise, and there would be a form of justice, but it would be a bit more crude, and you wouldn't have women talking out of turn, speaking rudely, being vulgar, and being abusive to males. This would not happen at all because it's frankly unnatural. And the only reason it does happen today is because when a woman yells at you or curses at you or physically abuses you or takes half of your stuff in a divorce or robs you for alimony, which is theft, she's doing that with a beta male army at her disposal, usually government bureaucrats, males, weak males. And the irony that we fail to see because we have so many low testosterone weak males is that even as we listen to this, we see playing out the tragedy. You see, she shouldn't be speaking about this. She should be sitting, and a man should be speaking about this, taking lead. It is in our failure to take leadership that we all suffer. We might suggest that the woman is the problem. No, it is in fact the man, for he is the leader, and you must blame the head. Now, are there a great number of unruly women who would like to usurp the authority of man? Oh, absolutely. And that is precisely why the males must be dealt with, the beta males must be dealt with, lest we all suffer. You see, there's so many persons who, for example, two of my favorite commentators, when I say favorite, I mean my favorite examples. We have Candace Owens, or Candace Slowens, and then we have Pearl, I forget what are Just Pearly Things. They're both women who claim to be traditional, yet they spend all of their time working like men. They claim to be traditional. You can say that right there. Thank you. They claim to be traditional, but they spend most of their time with men as colleagues, as peers, working, being breadwinners. So, where is the lived part of their philosophy? They're grifters. They're trying to make a buck, and they're making a buck mostly off of uninformed, disaffected, incel, weak, undesirable males. Strong men, we look at them and we see these women for precisely what they are. They're liars. They're examples of feminism. They're the exact example of what they say they don't want, and certainly an example of what we don't want. In the case of Pearl, for example, she can't find a man. In the case of Candace, she's found an effeminate male so that she can continue wearing the pants in the relationship. The problem is that males became so weak that the female could overcome us, and they have. Come on now. And they have. Let's work.
Medical schools are majority female. Women earn a majority of BAs and PhDs.
Now, what's important about her talking about law school, medical school, these are fields that are hugely important. These are the halls of power. And if the medical school today, if the law school today is overwhelmingly female, the law school today, that means that the courts of law tomorrow will be overly female. That means that the halls of power in medicine and medical policy will be overwhelmingly female. And that's not good. Do we need some females in medicine? Absolutely. I'd want my wife to have a female OBGYN for a variety of reasons. There are allowances. But mostly we see that the society has gone very far in the wrong direction.
College faculty are majority female. Women are 46% of the managers in the United States.
That's insane. Almost half of the managers, which is to say the leaders, which means that males are being subject to female leadership. And females, different than males, when females are in positions of leadership, it's a terrible thing, really. I've had to suffer it a couple times. One time was by a nice woman. She was a professor of mine, lovely lady, whom I love very much. But when I think back on the experience, I realize how much she tried to dominate me and force me into female thinking. I remember one particular situation. We were having a discussion about a former hot actress who had wanted to run for government office. I believe it was governor of California. And I raised my hand, and I stated that in a state like California, where drugs ail much of the population, we should have our best, because California itself could be a global economy if it was a country. It houses our greatest tech minds. California needs a great leader who is not only experienced, also a good business person, and certainly not a former drug addict, a recent drug addict. This actress was recently out of rehab. So I said, on the basis of that, she shouldn't even be allowed to run because her record is so bad, not only for lack of experience, but also so many marks against her. She doesn't have character as displayed by her record, not gossip or hearsay. And then this professor, whom I love and respect, then proceeded to take me outside of the class. This is during a debate. Takes me outside of the class and says, well, Marquette, there's people in our class right now who have struggles with drugs. And when you're telling them that this woman can't become governor because she's had a struggle with drugs, it hurts their feelings. Now, at the time, I was 16 years old. And I was kind of like, okay, I just accepted it. But as a man, I find it to be enraging, because my point still stands. The truth is incontrovertible. Because the truth hurts someone's feelings doesn't mean it's not the truth. And it is the female instinct to make everyone feel okay, even at the expense of truth and justice and what is right and what is best. And I'll never forget those moments where random females try to tear truth out of me. They try to tear masculinity out of me and try to make me be a good boy, be a good boy, which really they didn't mean be a good boy. They meant be a good girl. And this is what happens to generations of males, boys, male children coming up through the educational system, which is overwhelmingly female, especially in elementary. And some of them don't even have fathers at home. So they have a mother at home, and then they go into the schooling system and have another mother. And both of the mothers try to scrub out of them every bit of masculinity and testosterone and make them behave, think, and speak like females. Come on now.
And the white collar workforce overall, workers with college degrees, a majority of them are women. These are, in many cases, very recent developments, with the tipping point having occurred only in the last 5 to 10 years. And that is the other common misconception about the Great Feminization. People tend to think of feminism as something that occurred back in the 1970s, but it took several decades to go from token representation to was appointed in 1981.
One thing I want you guys to be very conscious of is that change may feel sudden, and she's speaking to this, and I'm clarifying it or emphasizing it. Change may feel sudden, but it's been decades in the making. And this is even true with the control over the United States government. There's one particular small country that's been misplaced, a recent creation in the Middle East, and they control the United States and much else. And that didn't happen overnight. It took decades of consistent work. And I can promise you that if we're going to set things right, it'll take decades of consistent work as well. But none of this just shows up suddenly. Success gathers, failure gathers, it accumulates. So we do have to get to work, and it won't be tomorrow that it turns around, but I can assure you, for your families, for your children, you can do the right thing for them, which is probably not to put them in a typical public school. You need to be thoughtful about where you have your kids go to school, thoughtful about their influences, thoughtful about, like, I'd never let my kids watch Netflix. There's too much skittle guzzling propaganda on there. You can't watch a show without all of a sudden there's two people of the same gender having a makeout session or intercourse. And you're like, what does this have to do with the plot? You can't have your kids watch Disney because all of a sudden the princess has a beard. You're like, what kind of a princess has a beard? And we find that they've embedded their propaganda in various forms of entertainment and media so that they can brainwash and influence the society in ways that are unnatural, establishing an unnatural order, that order having sexual deviance as a common way of behaving, and in addition, having the female on top where they ought not be.
The first woman on the Supreme Court was appointed in 1981, and in that year, women were 5% of the judges in America. Today, there are, of course, 4 women on the court,
Insane.
one justice away from a female majority.
Insane.
And women are 30% of the judges in America.
And I want you all to know that she's referencing the economist's work. He's a libertarian economist. And the idea that we should be mindful of the females on the number of females and the nature of the values of people in general on the Supreme Court is very important, because law actually creates culture. It allows for the flowering of certain types of culture, and it also limits other forms of culture. The law is not necessarily right morally, but there's the idea that if something's the law, it's morally right. There's also the idea that if something is the law, it is popular will. And often we should observe that the law may not reflect popular will, but it can create popular will, which is to say, integration maybe was not so popular among the majority in America, which is to say whites. Wasn't so popular. Then the laws changed. The laws were enforced by the government. And, decades later, you'd never know that it wasn't popular among average white Americans and that they resisted it tooth and nail, and they fought and they were violent about it. They engaged in terrorist attacks on children and women about it to prevent it. You'd never know that. The history kind of gets repackaged. And we find that today we're having a lot of history repackaged. I even hear people talking about Adolf Hitler and trying to portray him as though he was a good person just because he was dealing with certain problematic populations. So there's revisionist history going on all over the place. And we have to be very careful.
40% of the judges in the state of California, and 63% of the judges appointed by President Joe Biden. So from the first woman on the court to a likely female majority on the Supreme Court is probably going to be a span of about 50 years. And the exact same trajectory over the same timeline can be seen in many other professions. There was a pioneering generation in the 1970s where a woman was.
And one thing I want to acknowledge is that this woman is intelligent. She's well spoken. She's articulate. And she'd be best giving this lecture to a group of women, not to a mixed gender group, and certainly not to men. And absolutely, there should not be men sitting behind her. We must reorder things. And this is completely improper. This diverges from the roots of every society. And this is a representation of the problem. And we have to be able to see the irony here is that she's talking about female leadership and female domination as a bad thing while taking leadership and dominating and having two beta males sit behind her and listen to her as though, you know, she's like a beacon of knowledge, which is ironic because she's just merely speaking to the research done by who? A man. And this is not to take anything away from her, but this is to say that everything in their proper place. And if we don't have men who are bold enough and brave enough to speak on it, and more importantly, to live it out and enforce it, then we will all suffer.
Was often the only female reporter in her newsroom or the only female professor in her department. And then increasing female representation through the 80s and 90s until a healthy female representation of about 20 to 30% by the turn of the century. And today, 25 years later, in many of these fields, they are now 40% female or 50-50 gender equal. And the pendulum may not be done swinging yet. As feminized as we are, we may get more feminized still. Look at the...
It's not we may, we're guaranteed to get more feminized. And the boldness of these females is and it's not females in general, it's the unruly. It's particularly the liberal white woman who is a danger to us all. I've even seen them. And when I say them, I'm not talking about those who are demographically, in a literal sense, liberal white women. But the liberal white woman wears many skins. She wears multiple genders and sexual identities. And her ideology operates in the minds of the multitude. I've seen some of these acolytes walking around with T-shirts that read, "The future is female." One of them I know personally. She even has a son. And I just thought, you know, what kind of a harbinger is that for your son? Your son sees you wearing a shirt that says the future is female. First off, I was like, are you a lesbian? I'm just curious. That's kind of weird. You have a husband and a son, and you're saying the future is female. Do they not count in the future? Do they not matter in the future? You'd have them dominated in the future. And it's really a disgusting thing. But what's more disgusting is the kind of male who would marry such a female and procreate with her. And these guys are just as dangerous and certainly must be dealt with extreme prejudice. And the truth is they raise boys and they turn their boys into effeminate males or into girls outright, or female, or they, they masquerade as women, Caitlyn Jenner type stuff. And this is very dangerous. And we must fight this everywhere we see it. And I'm not encouraging anyone to go out and be loudmouth, rude, or impolite, but I am encouraging you to stop assisting in the tragedy. Stop assisting in the tragedy. Stop listening to a Just Pearly thing. Stop listening to a Candace Sloan. Stop saying that she's a good representation. Stop repeating what she says. Don't quote them. Marginalize them. And honestly, of the women that must be marginalized, they're not the first on the list. The first on the list are the liberal white women and the ones who follow their bidding, which would be inclusive of really any woman in power. But we really have to start with the ones at the top, especially the low IQ ones. Like Sarah Palin was one terrible example. The recent woman who's Indian and claims she's black because it's politically helpful. Kamala Harris. And then the AOC, I forget her whole name, but, and if you're not important, you shouldn't get to say your whole name. But whatever her name is, Ohakia Cortez something, Yeah, she's completely brainless and she should be done away with. And the funny thing is, in the current situation that we have, we find that the relationship networks are really what bring these women in, and DEI as well. And we, as a result, have a political class that's talentless. And this occurs on the male side as well. We see Donald Trump is getting on just fine. He probably shouldn't be in position now, should he? But again, we have fundamental problems with our political system, which allows for dynastic politics. You know, Bush Sr., Bush Jr., Bill Clinton, then his wife tries to run. Barack Obama does his thing. So then they say that his wife should get in there. It's the stupidity of the American population because our education is a miseducation. It's not just the IQ, it's really the education is important. In fact, there are many folks who have significant IQ. I know some of them personally because I went to Berkeley, and their IQ is used for evil aims. And that's due to poor parenting and a lack of character education, both of which we must bring back. Oh, can I take a quick break out to show you how ridiculous humankind is real quick? I get these messages for these scammers from these scammers all the time. Look at this. And again, masculinity, honestly, it needs to be not only taught and trained, but it needs to be enforced. Look at this. I'll show this to you guys. I got this email from a stranger. And let me enlarge this for you all. So I got this email, and this individual writes, Marquette, good day to you. I recently came across your YouTube channel. Recently. So you just figured out who I am. And he writes, the first video I saw was your offer to Dr. Umar, okay, for a real estate deal, mind you. He writes, without much further ado, I would like your financial input. It's funny how he put that, financial input, which is to say, I'm begging you, a stranger, for money. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I'm begging you, a stranger, for money. This is really a low thing, especially for a male, because men should know that we have to earn money. Earn. You have to work for money, not beg for your money. Not offer, like from a stranger of all things, offering no value whatsoever. And then he goes on about some TV show he's created. And it's funny to me. So then I ask him, are you a member at thesassin.com? Which is to say, you know, if he's a member, then at least he's made some contribution, or he's serious, or he's a part of this community that we have. And then I'll at least engage him with some education. And then he says, no, I'm not a member. And then look at this. He writes, thanks for showing me the options that are available. So you're not a member. You're just a random stranger begging random people for money, which shows you have no sense of shame and no integrity. And then I said, oh, well, are you a member? Like, are you even a part of my group? And then he didn't say, oh, yeah, I am, or I'm joining. He just, oh, thanks for showing me the options, which is to say, I would ask you for potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands. I would beg you for, but I wouldn't even spend $16 to be a part of this group and learn something about the movement that you're putting forward and participate and contribute. And that is the low, increasingly high percentage of the human population, but particularly the male population. That's particularly a despicable thing when males are doing it. Yes. And these are the kind of things that we need to be aware of so that we can fight it, because it's not just about telling females what they should and shouldn't do. It's about making sure that the woman is under a man who's worthy of being under. Come on now. Yes, indeed. And I'm still not entirely sure how the live chat works here on Facebook. If someone would, because I'm seeing what's called comments. I don't know if those are actually live chat. So give me a moment, make sure that we're still live here. Then we'll pick up right where we were.
The example of the profession of psychology. As recently as 25 years ago, psychology was a predominantly male profession, up to 70%
That's crazy.
male. Today, the youngest cohort of psychologists just joining the profession, 20% male. Men have
Wow.
evacuated the profession of psychology. And it's easy to understand why. It's because psychology has become feminized.
Yeah, I think she's missing an like one step before that I'd really be curious to hear discuss, which is the step of, well, why have women poured into the field of psychology in such a high number? And I think that it's because one, women often are struggling with their own emotions due to their biology. They're trying to figure out themselves, which is an enigma they'll never solve. And so they pile into this field that is largely based on talking, which women love to do. And so it seems perfectly suited for them because also there are no solutions in psychology, which is why people end up seeing a therapist for years on end, or they end up doped up on drugs, neither of which actually fixes anything. It's perfectly suited for the female frailty. And now the problem is that, and you can hear it in the culture, you'll hear people trying to pathologize every behavior, especially behaviors that are natural to a warm-blooded, testosterone-filled man. Oh, you're a narcissistic, you're a this, you're a fill in the blank with something that essentially describes a behavior that they don't like, a normal, natural behavior that they don't like, or someone who holds them accountable, or someone who is honest with them, or someone who doesn't like them. If you're not focused on them, then you're a narcissist because you're focused on you. Extraordinary. And it's ironic because the only reason that they're mad that you're a narcissist is because you don't feed into their narcissism. This is the world that we're living in. It's completely upside down. In fact, the entire field of psychology is little more than a joke now. And we knew that. I believe it was circa 1973, 75, that there was a meeting of the, was it the American Psychological Association, something like this? I trust that the chat will correct me. And this is when the DSM was modified. And usually when they remove a diagnosis, there's an academic paper, peer reviewed. But in this case, they yielded to protest. And this is when they altered the definitions of, sexual deviance being a representation of mental illness. And now it's just accepted. It's all good because in the woman's eyes, everything is okay. All behaviors are acceptable and good. That's the sadness, is that in the woman's perspective, it's all good. They're not the natural disciplinarian. That's the man. They're not the one that sets the limits. That's the man. That's why we know women to be over consumers and big spenders, even when they don't have the money.